The massive space station hung in the darkness like a jewel made of silver and light. It was called the Grand Assembly, and it was the most important place in the entire galaxy. Inside its walls, the leaders of 12 powerful alien races made decisions that affected trillions of lives across thousands of worlds. Today, the station had new visitors who made many of the older members uncomfortable. Commander Jake Morrison stood in the center of the great chamber and tried not to feel small. The room was enormous, with ceilings that stretched so high they disappeared into artificial clouds. Around him in a circle sat the Council of 12, each representative perched on platforms that floated in the air. Some of the aliens were twice his height. Others glowed with their own light. A few looked almost human, while others were so strange that Jake had trouble figuring out which end was the head. Laura Bennett stood beside him, holding a data pad that contained information she desperately wanted to share. She was younger than Jake, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her job was to understand technology, and right now she understood that nobody in this room wanted to listen to her. Behind them, displayed on a holographic screen, Admiral Henry Clark watched from Earth. The Admiral was an older man with gray hair and a face that had seen too many battles. Jake cleared his throat and began to speak. His words were translated instantly into dozens of languages by the station's computer systems. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," he said, keeping his voice steady and respectful. "Humanity thanks you for accepting us as provisional members 3 years ago. We have learned much from you, and we hope to contribute to the peace and prosperity of the galaxy." Several of the council members shifted in their seats. The Zeltharian ambassador, a creature that looked like a giant mantis made of blue crystal, clicked its mandibles together in what might have been impatience. Jake continued. "However, we must discuss a serious matter. Earth has developed extensive defensive systems around our homeworld and throughout our solar system. These defenses are automatic and extremely powerful. We are here to warn the Council that any unauthorized approach to Earth will trigger these systems. We strongly request that proper protocols be established to prevent tragic accidents." For a moment, there was silence. Then the chamber erupted with sounds. Some aliens made noises that the translators struggled to interpret. Others simply stared. The Korthax delegate, a massive reptilian creature covered in red scales, threw back its head and laughed. The sound was like rocks grinding together. "Defenses?" the Korthax bellowed. "You speak of defenses? Your species discovered faster than light travel only 3 years ago. You have barely left your own star system. What defenses could you possibly have that would concern us?" Laura stepped forward, her face flushed with frustration. "If you would review the technical data we have prepared, you would see that—" "We have seen your ships," interrupted the luminary representative, a being made of flowing light that somehow maintained a vaguely humanoid shape. Its voice was soft but carried clearly through the chamber. "They are simple constructions. Functional, perhaps, but centuries behind our own technology. We mean no offense, but your assessment of your own capabilities may be somewhat optimistic." Jake felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice calm. "We are not being optimistic. We are trying to prevent a disaster. Our defensive network is not something we developed recently. We have been building it for decades, long before we achieved faster-than-light travel." The ancient being who led the council, Archon Velis, raised one of its many hands. It looked like a tree that had learned to walk, with bark-like skin and branches that served as limbs. When it spoke, even the laughing Korthax fell silent. "Commander Morrison," Velis said in a voice like wind through leaves, "we appreciate your concern. However, the civilizations represented here have existed for thousands of years. We have weapons that can crack planets and shields that can withstand the fury of suns. If your species has placed some missile platforms around Earth, that is admirable initiative. But we do not believe the galaxy's advanced races need fear your early-stage defensive installations." Jake wanted to argue, but he could see it was useless. These beings had lived for centuries. Their civilizations had mastered space travel when humans were still figuring out agriculture. To them, humanity was like a child playing with toys and claiming to have built a fortress. "At least accept our technical specifications," Laura said, holding up her data pad. "Let your analysts review what we have built. Then you can make an informed decision." The Zeltharian ambassador clicked its mandibles again. "We do not need to review the specifications of primitive weapons. Your species will learn in time what true power means. Until then, perhaps focus on understanding the technologies we have already shared with you." Several other council members made sounds of agreement. Jake felt Admiral Clark's eyes on him from the holographic display, but the Admiral remained silent. They had expected this response, but experiencing it was still frustrating. Archon Velis spoke again. "This council thanks you for your warning, Commander Morrison. We will make note of Earth's defensive concerns. However, we do not anticipate any issues. The civilizations of this council have no hostile intentions toward Earth, and we are confident that any misunderstandings can be resolved through proper communication." The meeting was over. Jake could feel it in the way the council members were already turning their attention to other matters. He gave a short bow, which was the appropriate gesture of respect, and turned to leave. Laura followed him, her knuckles white as she gripped her datapad. They walked through the corridors of the Grand Assembly in silence. The station was beautiful, with walls that seemed to be made of flowing water and floors that felt soft as grass. Alien beings of every description moved past them, most barely glancing at the humans. After 3 years, humanity was no longer a novelty. When they reached their assigned quarters, Laura finally spoke. They did not even look at the data. Not even a glance. "I know," Jake said, pouring himself a drink from the food processor. "The machine could create almost anything, though it never tasted quite right." "They think we are children," Laura continued, pacing back and forth. "They think we are playing pretend with our little weapons." "They have been in space for thousands of years," Jake replied. "To them, we probably are children." "Then someone is going to get hurt," Laura said quietly. "Someone will decide to test Earth's defenses just to prove humans wrong. And when that happens, people will die." Jake had no response to that because he knew she was right. He activated his private communication link to Admiral Clark, who had already returned to his office deep inside a mountain on Earth. They did not listen. "Admiral," Jake reported. Clark's weathered face showed no surprise. "We predicted this outcome. The question now is what happens next." "Maybe nothing happens," Jake said without much hope. "Maybe they will leave Earth alone." "Maybe," Clark agreed. But neither of them believed it. The next morning, Jake woke to an urgent message flashing on his communication device. He read it 3 times before his brain fully accepted what it was saying. Then he was running down the corridor toward Laura's quarters, not caring that he was still in his sleeping clothes. He pounded on her door until she opened it, looking confused and alarmed. "What is wrong?" she asked. Jake held up his device so she could read the message. Her face went pale as she read the words. A Korthax expeditionary fleet had changed course during the night. 30 warships, a significant military force by any standard, were now heading directly toward Earth. According to the message, they would reach the outer edge of the solar system in approximately 48 hours. "Oh no," Laura whispered. Jake was already contacting Admiral Clark. The Admiral appeared on the holographic display, and Jake could see other officers moving frantically in the background of the command center. "Admiral, tell me you have seen the reports," Jake said. "We have seen them," Clark confirmed. "Battle Commander Jar-Ek is leading the fleet. He is a decorated Korthax officer with a reputation for aggressive tactics. Our analysts believe he wants to demonstrate Korthax superiority over humanity. Can you contact them? Warn them off?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. "We have been broadcasting warnings on all frequencies for the past hour," Clark said. "They are ignoring us. Commander Morrison, you need to inform the Council immediately. They need to stop this before it is too late." Jake ended the connection and looked at Laura. She was already dressed and pulling on her boots. "The Council convenes in 2 hours," she said. "We need to get there early and demand an emergency session." They ran through the corridors of the Grand Assembly, startling several aliens who were not accustomed to seeing humans move with such urgency. When they reached the Council chamber, they found it empty except for a few maintenance workers. Jake contacted Archon Velis directly, something that was technically not proper protocol, but he was past caring about protocol. When the ancient being's face appeared on his communication device, Jake spoke quickly. "Archon, a Korthax fleet is heading for Earth. You must contact them and order them to change course. If they enter our defensive perimeter, our systems will engage them automatically." Velis was quiet for a long moment. "Battle Commander Zare." 3 months after Earth gained full membership in the Galactic Council, the galaxy faced a crisis that made the Korthax incident seem small by comparison. The warning came suddenly and without mercy. 15 worlds on the galactic rim reported massive fleet movements heading toward Council space. The Varkhan Empire, a militaristic civilization that had been quietly expanding for decades, had finally decided the time was right for conquest. Jake Morrison learned about the invasion during what should have been a routine council session. Archon Velis appeared on the central platform, looking more distressed than Jake had ever seen the ancient being. When Velis spoke, there was no disguising the fear in its voice. The Varkhan Empire has launched a coordinated assault on 15 council member worlds. Intelligence indicates their invasion force numbers more than 3,000 warships. 2 worlds have already fallen. We estimate the others have less than a week before they are overrun. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted questions and accusations in dozens of languages. The Ziltharian ambassador demanded to know why the council's intelligence services had failed to predict such a massive buildup. Others wanted to know what forces could be mobilized to defend the threatened worlds. Laura Bennett, sitting beside Jake in the human delegation section, pulled up tactical data on her pad. She studied the numbers and her face went pale. "Jake, look at this!" The Varkhan have 300 worlds under their control. Their fleet is massive and their technology is advanced. The Council worlds are primarily peaceful civilizations with small defensive forces. How many ships can the Council muster? Jake asked. Laura scrolled through the data. According to this, if every Council member contributes their entire military force, they might field 800 ships. Against 3,000 Varkhan warships, that is not enough. Archon Velis finally restored order to the chamber. The ancient being looked at each council member in turn before speaking. The question before us is simple. What forces can each civilization commit to the defense of the threatened worlds? We must act quickly or those worlds will fall. One by one, the council members reported their available forces. The numbers were depressing. Most civilizations had focused on science, culture, and trade for centuries. Their military forces were small, designed for peacekeeping and defense, not large-scale warfare. The Luminari could contribute 70 ships. The Aquarian Collective had 50. Even the Gordanian Union, one of the more militaristic council members, could only offer 140 vessels. The Korthax representative, Battle Commander Drenax, who had replaced the disgraced Jarek, stood to make his report. The Korthax High Command can deploy 200 warships within 3 days. However, I must point out that even with all our combined forces, we are heavily outnumbered. Then the threatened worlds will have to be evacuated, the Ziltharian ambassador said, its mandibles clicking in distress. We cannot defend them against such overwhelming force. Jake looked at Admiral Henry Clark, who was observing the session via holographic link from Earth. The Admiral gave a small nod, a gesture only Jake could see. They had discussed this possibility during the flight to the council station. Jake stood up. The human delegation requests permission to address the council. Archon Velis looked surprised but gestured for Jake to approach the central platform. As Jake walked forward, he could feel every eye in the chamber focused on him. Some looked curious, others skeptical, and a few seemed almost hopeful. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Jake began. Earth has been monitoring the Varkhan situation since we received the first warnings. We understand the gravity of the threat, and we wish to contribute to the defense of the Council worlds. Commander Morrison, the Gordanian representative said, we appreciate the gesture, but humanity is a single species with limited spacefaring experience. What could you possibly contribute to a conflict of this magnitude? Admiral Clark's hologram materialized beside Jake, larger than life and impossible to ignore. The Admiral's weathered face was calm and professional. Earth can field a fleet of 200 vessels within 48 hours, Clark said without preamble. Within 1 week, we can deploy 500 warships to the front lines. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Then Battle Commander Drenax laughed, but it was not a dismissive sound this time. It was the laugh of someone who had learned not to underestimate humans. Forgive me, Admiral, Drenax said, but 200 ships? You claimed your defenses were purely for protecting your home system. Where did these warships come from? We built them, Clark replied simply. Our construction facilities have been producing vessels for the past 5 years. We hoped we would never need to use them for anything except patrol and exploration. But we are a practical species. We prepare for contingencies. Laura transmitted data to the Council's central display. Suddenly, the chamber was filled with images of human warships detaching from orbital construction yards around Earth, Mars, and the asteroid belt. The ships were massive, bristling with weapons. And there were indeed hundreds of them. The vessels had names that meant nothing to the aliens but carried weight for humanity. The EDS New York, the EDS Midway, the EDS Berlin, the EDS Tokyo. Each one represented a city or a battle from Earth's history, a reminder of where humans came from and what they could achieve when pushed. Chief Engineer Gary Phillips appeared on another holographic display, speaking from one of the orbital yards. These ships have been completed for months. We kept them in reserve, hoping we would never need them. Each vessel is equipped with railguns, missile batteries, laser arrays, and defensive shields based on modified luminary technology that we adapted after joining the Council. Pelix, the Aquarian scientist who had visited Earth during the investigation, stood up. "This is extraordinary. How did you build so many ships so quickly?" "The same way we built our defensive network," Clark explained. "Industrial-scale manufacturing, automated production systems, and abundant energy from fusion reactors. Once you have those three things, building ships becomes a matter of time and resources, both of which we have." Archon Velis was quiet for a long moment. When the ancient being finally spoke, its voice carried a mixture of relief and something that might have been respect. "Admiral Clark, Commander Morrison, on behalf of the Council, we accept Earth's offer of military assistance. However, I must ask, why would humanity risk its forces for worlds you barely know?" Jake answered before Clark could speak. "Because we believe in defending those who cannot defend themselves. Because we believe that standing together is better than standing alone. And because we joined the Galactic Council, not just to benefit from your knowledge and trade, but to contribute to the greater good of all civilizations." The Council voted unanimously to accept Earth's military contribution. Within hours, the human fleet began moving toward the threatened worlds. Lieutenant Commander Helen Price stood on the bridge of the EDS Washington, a massive dreadnought that served as the flagship of the human task force. Around her, the bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency, preparing for the battles ahead. Navigation Officer Chris Walker plotted the fastest route to the Zeltharian system, which intelligence indicated would be the Varkon's next target. "We can reach the system in 36 hours at maximum faster than light speed, Commander." "Then that is what we will do," Helen said. She was a career military officer who had spent 20 years preparing for a war she hoped would never come. Now that the war was here, she felt strangely calm. This was what she had trained for. The human fleet arrived at the Zeltharian homeworld to find it under siege. The planet's orbital defenses were failing, and the small Zeltharian defense fleet was being systematically destroyed by a massive Varkon armada. War Master Krelix commanded the Varkon forces from his flagship, a massive vessel that was more fortress than ship. Krelix was confident. His intelligence reports had told him about the humans. But what were a few hundred primitive ships against his 1,000-vessel assault force? He would crush the Zeltharian defenses, then turn his attention to the newcomers and teach them the price of interference. His confidence lasted approximately 4 minutes after the human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel. Captain Stephen Carter commanded the EDS Chicago, a fast attack cruiser designed for hit-and-run tactics. His ship led the first strike wave, accompanied by 15 other cruisers that moved with coordinated precision. Weapons Officer White, "You are clear to engage," Stephen ordered. Karen White, sitting at the weapons station, activated the Chicago's railgun batteries. The ship carried 12 magnetic accelerators, each capable of firing a tungsten projectile at a significant fraction of light speed. When all 12 fired simultaneously, the effect was devastating. A Varkon heavy cruiser that had been bombarding the planet's surface suddenly stopped firing. Its shields had collapsed under the kinetic impact, and its hull was breached in multiple locations. Before the crew could respond, the Chicago fired again and the cruiser began breaking apart. "Target destroyed," Karen reported. "Acquiring next target." Across the battlefield, human ships were demonstrating tactics that confused and frustrated the Varkon forces. The human vessels moved in. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything Jake Morrison had ever witnessed. The great chamber was filled with tension so thick he could almost feel it pressing against his skin. Every member of the Council of 12 was present, and none of them were laughing now. The Korthak seat was conspicuously empty. Battle Commander Jarek had been recalled in disgrace, and the Korthak's high command had yet to send a replacement. Archon Velis spoke first, and the ancient being's voice carried a weight that demanded attention. Commander Morrison, the Council has reviewed the battle data from the engagement between the Korthax Expeditionary Fleet and Earth's defensive systems. We acknowledge that your warnings were sincere and that we should have taken them more seriously. Jake noticed that Velis had carefully avoided using the word apology, but he understood this was as close as the Council would come. These were beings who had ruled the galaxy for millennia, and admitting error did not come easily to them. The Council requests a full disclosure of Earth's defensive capabilities, Velis continued. We need to understand the extent and nature of the systems you have deployed. To facilitate this, we are sending an investigative team to your solar system. We hope you will grant them access to tour your installations. Laura Bennett stepped forward with her datapad, finally getting the opportunity she had wanted from the beginning. We would be happy to provide the Council with complete technical specifications and arrange tours of our facilities. However, I should mention that what the Korthax encountered was only our outer perimeter. Our defensive network has multiple layers extending throughout the entire solar system. The Zeltharian ambassador, who had laughed at Jake's warnings just days before, made a clicking sound that the translator interpreted as distress. Multiple layers? How extensive are these defenses? Extensive enough, Jake said simply. The investigative team arrived at Earth within a week. Ambassador Senara of the Luminari led the delegation, accompanied by military analyst Throck of the Gordanian Union and chief scientist Pelix from the Aquarian Collective. Each had been chosen for their expertise and Jake suspected for their ability to remain calm in surprising situations. They were going to need that ability. General Paul Griffin met them at the orbital transfer station above Earth, accompanied by strategic advisor Nicole Grant. Nicole was a sharp woman in her early 40s, who had spent her career studying military theory and alien psychology. She knew how to present information in ways that would have maximum impact on different species. Welcome to the Sol system, Griffin said, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. Ambassador Senara, whose form was made of flowing light, somehow managed to mimic the gesture. The others nodded in their own species-specific ways. Thank you for agreeing to this inspection, General, Senara said. Her voice had a musical quality that human ears found pleasant. We understand this is somewhat intrusive, but the Council needs to understand what happened to the Korthax fleet. We understand completely, Griffin replied. In fact, we hope this tour will help prevent future incidents. Follow me, please. They took a shuttle down to Earth, landing at a facility carved deep into a mountain in Colorado. The aliens were quiet as they traveled through tunnels that extended hundreds of meters underground. Finally, they emerged into a massive chamber filled with computer equipment that hummed with power. This is Deep Space Command, Griffin explained. From here, we coordinate all defensive operations throughout the solar system. Every weapon platform, every sensor array, every automated system reports to this location. Pelix, whose species looked like bipedal dolphins with hands instead of fins, examined the computer systems with obvious fascination. These processing units are using quantum entanglement for computation. That is extremely advanced technology. Most species do not achieve stable quantum computing until they have been spacefaring for several centuries. Nicole Grant smiled slightly. We had the advantage of developing our computational technology before we achieved faster-than-light travel. By the time we reached space, our computer systems were already quite sophisticated. Throck, a massive being covered in rocky plates that made him look like a walking boulder, studied the tactical displays on the walls. This shows the positions of your defensive platforms. There are thousands of them. How is this possible? Your species has only been building in space for a few decades. We will show you, Griffin said. The next stop was the orbital construction yards above Earth's moon. Captain Ryan Foster, a cheerful man who clearly loved his work, gave them the tour. The aliens stared in amazement at the massive facilities where ships and weapon platforms were being built by automated systems that worked around the clock. We industrialized our entire solar system, Ryan explained, gesturing at the construction berths where new platforms were taking shape. We have mining operations on asteroids, processing facilities on the Moon and Mars, and construction yards in orbit around multiple planets. When we discovered we were not alone in the universe, we decided we needed to be ready for anything. So we built Engineer Beth Coleman, a woman with grease-stained hands and an easy smile, showed them the automated assembly lines. Each of these production lines can manufacture a weapon platform in about 6 hours. We have 247 production lines operating simultaneously across the solar system. That means we can replace any losses very quickly. Sonara's light flickered in what might have been shock. You are producing defensive systems at an industrial scale. This is not a defensive network. This is a manufacturing capacity designed to support prolonged warfare. Yes, Beth agreed simply. That is exactly what it is. The tour continued to Luna Base 7, a facility on the far side of Earth's moon. Commander Jack Sullivan showed them the magnetic accelerator arrays, massive installations that stretched for kilometers across the lunar surface. These are mass drivers, Jack explained. We can use them to launch cargo throughout the solar system very efficiently. They are also capable of launching kinetic projectiles with extreme accuracy across millions of kilometers of space. Throck examined the installations carefully. The power generation required for these systems must be enormous. We built fusion reactors specifically to power them, Jack said. Each base has its own power supply. The arrays are completely independent and can operate without any external support. Pelix was making calculations on a small device he carried. When he finished, he looked at the humans with something that might have been fear. Each of these installations generates enough power to supply an entire Aquarian colony world. You have built 9 of them throughout your solar system. The total energy output is staggering. Energy was one of the first problems we solved when we industrialized space, Nicole explained. Fusion power gave us unlimited energy as long as we had access to hydrogen, which is abundant in our solar system. Once we solved energy, everything else became easier. But the most disturbing revelation came at the Neptune Research Station, a facility orbiting in the cold darkness of the outer solar system. Dr. Lisa Hayes met them there, accompanied by her colleague Marcus Reed. Lisa was a brilliant robotics engineer who had spent 15 years working on autonomous systems. This is Project Sentinel, Lisa explained, leading them into a laboratory where small machines were assembling copies of themselves. These are self-replicating construction drones. Given raw materials, they can build more drones and use those drones to construct weapon platforms, sensor arrays, or whatever else we need. Sonara's light dimmed noticeably. Self-replicating machines? Do you understand the danger of such technology? We understand it very well, Marcus replied. He was older than Lisa, with gray hair and a serious expression. The drones have multiple safeguards built into their programming. They cannot replicate beyond specified limits, they cannot modify their own code, and they have shutdown protocols that we can activate remotely. We have been testing them for 8 years with no incidents. But the principle remains, Throck said slowly. Your defensive capabilities are not static. They are growing exponentially. The platforms the Korthax encountered were just a small fraction of what you could deploy if you chose to expand the system. That is correct, Lisa confirmed. The investigative team gathered in a conference room on the Neptune station. Through the windows, they could see the pale blue glow of the distant planet. Griffin and his team sat across from the 3 aliens, and for several minutes nobody spoke. Finally, Sonara asked the question that had been bothering all of them. Why did you build all of this? Your species had no evidence of hostile alien life when you began this project. Why such extensive preparations for a threat that might not exist? Jake Morrison, who had joined them for this part of the tour, answered honestly. Ambassador, Earth's history is defined by conflict. For thousands of years, different groups of humans fought each other for resources, territory, and ideology. We built weapons, we developed strategies, and we learned hard lessons about what happens when you are unprepared for war. He paused, looking out at the stars. When we finally achieved peace among ourselves and reached space, we faced a choice. We could hope that any aliens we encountered would be peaceful and friendly. Or we... Battle Commander Jarek stood on the bridge of his flagship and felt satisfaction warm his blood. Around him, his crew worked efficiently at their stations, monitoring the 30 warships that followed his command. They were all vessels of the Korthax fleet, painted in the traditional red and black colors that had brought fear to countless worlds over the centuries. Status report, Jarek commanded, his voice a deep rumble that carried authority. Tactical Officer Vren looked up from his console. He was younger than the battle commander, with scales that still showed the bright green of youth mixed with the red of maturity. We are approaching the outer edge of the human solar system, Commander. We will reach the region they call the Kuiper Belt in approximately 3 hours. Have the humans responded to our approach? Jarek asked. They have been broadcasting warnings on all frequencies, Vren replied. They demand that we change course and request permission before entering their system. The messages are quite insistent. Jarek laughed and several of his bridge crew joined him. Of course they are insistent. They are frightened. A real military force is approaching their primitive world and they realize how weak they truly are. Vren hesitated before speaking again. Commander, perhaps we should maintain a greater distance. The human representative at the council seemed genuinely concerned about their defensive capabilities. The human was bluffing, Jarek said dismissively. It is what weak species do when they want to appear strong. We will approach their world, conduct our survey, and report back to the council that human defenses are nothing to be concerned about. It will be a valuable lesson for these newcomers about their place in the galaxy. Deep beneath a mountain in Colorado, General Paul Griffin watched the Korthax fleet advance on a massive display screen. The command center was filled with officers and technicians, all of them focused on their tasks with practiced efficiency. The room hummed with quiet conversation and the soft beeping of computer systems. Beside Griffin stood Captain Lisa Morgan, her hands moving across a holographic interface as she monitored the defensive network. Every weapon platform, every sensor array, every automated system in the solar system reported to this room. She had been working on these systems for 15 years, and she knew them better than she knew her own home. The Korthax fleet has crossed the heliopause, she reported. They are officially inside our solar system. Have they responded to our warnings? Griffin asked, though he already knew the answer. Communications Officer Kevin Hart shook his head. Negative, sir. We have sent messages in Korthax language, in Galactic Common, and in simple mathematical sequences. They are receiving our transmissions but choosing to ignore them. Griffin watched the display screen where 30 red dots representing Korthax ships moved steadily toward Earth. Behind those dots, green icons showed the defensive platforms that had been hidden throughout the solar system for decades. There were thousands of them, each one waiting silently for activation. Captain Morgan, what is the status of the outer perimeter? Griffin asked. All systems are green, sir. The platforms are tracking the Korthax fleet and waiting for your command. Morgan's voice was steady, but Griffin could hear the tension underneath. Nobody wanted this to happen. Open a final channel to the Korthax flagship, Griffin ordered. Let me speak directly to their commander. Hart worked his console for a moment, then nodded. Channel open, sir. Griffin spoke clearly and slowly. Battle Commander Jarek of the Korthax fleet. This is General Paul Griffin of Earth Defense Command. You are in violation of our solar system's security perimeter. Your presence here is unauthorized and will be interpreted as a hostile act. You must leave immediately, or our defensive systems will engage your fleet automatically. This is not a bluff. This is not a negotiation. This is your final warning. For several long seconds, there was only silence. Then a rough, amused voice came through the speakers. General Griffin, your warnings are noted. We are conducting a simple survey of your system. We mean no harm. Lower your shields and prepare to be inspected. This is standard protocol for primitive worlds. Griffin closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, his face was set. Captain Morgan, the Korthax fleet has refused to leave. Authorization code Griffin Alpha 7. You are cleared to activate the outer perimeter. Morgan's fingers moved across her interface. Throughout the Kuiper Belt, hundreds of objects that looked like asteroids and space debris suddenly came to life. Power cores that had been dormant for years activated in seconds. Weapon systems that had been disguised and hidden began to rotate toward their targets. Aboard the Korthax flagship, alarms began to scream. Vren stared at his sensor display in disbelief. Commander, we have multiple weapons locks. Hundreds of them! They were hidden among the asteroids and debris. I am reading massive power signatures all around us. Jarek stepped toward the tactical station, his earlier confidence fading. Impossible. Our sensors would have detected weapons platforms. They were cold, Commander. They had no power signatures until 30 seconds ago. Now they are all active and targeting our ships. Evasive maneuvers, Jarek ordered. All ships activate defensive shields and prepare for combat. The first railgun fired before his shields were fully powered. A tungsten rod the size of a telephone pole, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, punched through the shields of a Korthax destroyer like they were not even there. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash that lit up the darkness of space. Then the other platforms opened fire. Hundreds of railguns launched their deadly projectiles at speeds that made them almost impossible to avoid. 3 more Korthax ships disappeared in explosions before Jarek could even process what was happening. "Return fire," he roared. "Destroy those platforms." The Korthax ships unleashed their own weapons, powerful plasma cannons that had shattered the defenses of dozens of worlds. The green bolts of energy struck the human platforms and several exploded. But for every platform destroyed, 5 more opened fire. The humans had built redundancy into every system, and they had built far more platforms than anyone had imagined possible. Vren's claws moved frantically across his console. "Commander, the platforms are repositioning. They are using small thrusters to move unpredictably. Our targeting computers cannot lock onto them effectively." Jarek watched his tactical display as more ships took damage. The humans were using simple kinetic weapons, just metal rods moving very fast. But the speeds involved made them devastating. His shields could stop energy weapons and even most missiles, but they struggled against solid projectiles with so much momentum. "New contacts," Vren shouted. "Multiple laser arrays are powering up. They are using nuclear explosions to pump the lasers." The second wave of Earth's defenses activated. Massive laser installations, each powered by small nuclear devices, began firing concentrated beams of light. The beams were invisible in space, but their effects were obvious. When multiple lasers focused on a single target, even Korthax shields collapsed within seconds. On Mars, Lieutenant Danny Pierce and Science Officer Amy Walsh watched the battle from an observation station. Amy's instruments recorded every detail of the engagement, data that would be studied for years to come. "The Korthax shields are adapting," Amy reported. "They are rotating frequencies to try to disperse the laser energy." "Is it working?" Danny asked somewhat. "But look at this," Amy pointed to her display. "The human defense network is already switching tactics. The railguns are firing at different angles to hit the ships from multiple directions at once. The lasers are using different wavelengths. The system is not following a simple program. It is adapting in real time." Danny felt a chill run down his spine. He had helped install some of these defensive systems years ago, but he had never seen them used in actual combat. The efficiency was terrifying. Aboard the Korthax flagship, Jarek finally accepted the truth. His fleet was being destroyed by an enemy he had dismissed as primitive. Half his ships were already gone or too damaged to fight. The humans had been telling the truth about their defenses, and he had refused to listen. "All ships, full retreat," he ordered. "Emergency faster-than-light jump as soon as possible." But the human defenses were not finished. As the Korthax fleet tried to flee, they discovered the third layer of Earth's protection. Thousands of small objects began moving toward them. Objects that had been mistaken for more asteroids and debris. "What are those?" Jarek demanded. "Drones, Commander. Autonomous attack drones. There are thousands of them, and they are moving to intercept our escape vector." The drones were small, each one barely larger than a human fighter craft, but they moved with incredible coordination. They attacked in swarms, dozens of drones focusing on individual ships. They carried simple weapons, mostly small missiles and kinetic projectors, but their numbers made them overwhelming. A Korthax cruiser tried to shoot its way through the drone swarm. It destroyed 20 drones in the first few seconds, but 50 more took their place. The drones coordinated their attacks, hitting the cruiser from every angle at once until its shields failed and its hull was breached. Jarek's flagship had the strongest shields in the fleet, and it managed to break through the drone swarm with heavy damage. 18 of his 30. During one of the breaks in the symposium, Pelix approached Linda with what looked like excitement on his dolphin-like features. "Dr. Grant, your species' approach to problem-solving is fascinating. Where most civilizations develop incrementally over centuries, humans seem to make sudden leaps. How do you explain this?" Linda smiled. "I think it comes from our history of competition. For thousands of years, human nations competed with each other. That competition drove rapid innovation because nobody wanted to fall behind. When we finally unified and reached space, we applied that same competitive drive to solving problems like energy generation, manufacturing, and defense." "Competition," Pelix mused. "Most council species abandoned competition long ago in favor of cooperation. Perhaps we lost something important in the process. Or perhaps you gained something equally important," Linda replied. The key is finding the right balance. The formal signing ceremony took place 3 days later. Admiral Clark, Jake Morrison, and Laura Bennett represented Earth, standing alongside Archon Velis and the other council leaders. The document they signed was more than just a treaty. It was a commitment to a new kind of galactic community, one that valued both peace and the strength to defend it. As the ceremony concluded, Battle Commander Drenax approached Jake privately. The Korthax delegate had been quiet during most of the proceedings, but now he seemed to have something to say. "Commander Morrison," Drenax began, his voice formal, "the Korthax High Command has instructed me to deliver an official apology. When we sent our fleet to test your defenses, we acted out of arrogance and pride. We did not respect your warnings, and many of our people died because of that mistake. We hope that in time, we can build a genuine alliance with humanity." Jake extended his hand in the human gesture of peace. After a moment's hesitation, the war against the Varkon Empire dragged on for 3 long months, but the momentum shifted after that first battle at the Zeltharian homeworld. Human forces, working alongside ships from every council member species, pushed the Varkon invaders back system by system. What the Varkon had thought would be an easy conquest turned into a grinding campaign that cost them dearly. Admiral Henry Clark coordinated the combined fleet from a command ship that traveled between battle zones. He was an old soldier who had spent his entire career preparing for war, and now he finally had the chance to prove that all those years of preparation had been worthwhile. Under his command, the diverse council forces learned to work together, combining human tactical aggression with alien technology and experience. At the Battle of Cordian Prime, a heavily industrialized world that supplied much of the Council's manufacturing capacity, Captain Rachel Stone led a daring assault that broke a Varkon siege. Her battle group consisted of 20 human ships supported by 30 vessels from the Luminari, Aquarian, and Gordanian fleets. The mixed force had trained together for only 2 weeks, but they moved with impressive coordination. Lieutenant Victor Hayes commanded one of the destroyers in Rachel's battle group. He watched his tactical display as the human ships moved into position for the attack. "All ships report ready, Captain Stone." "Execute the maneuver," Rachel ordered. The battle group split into 3 prongs, each one targeting a different section of the Varkon defensive formation. The human ships led each prong, using their superior sensors and communications to identify weak points in the enemy formation. Behind them, the alien vessels provided supporting fire and acted as a reserve force. Commander Nina Foster piloted her cruiser through a gap in the Varkon lines, her weapons firing continuously at enemy ships that tried to close the breach. The maneuver was dangerous, essentially diving into the middle of an enemy fleet, but it divided the Varkon forces and created chaos in their defensive positions. "This is insane," her tactical officer muttered. "This is human tactics," Nina replied with a grim smile. "We are not here to fight safely. We are here to win." The battle lasted 4 hours and ended with the Varkon fleet retreating in disorder. Cordian Prime was saved, and its grateful population sent messages of thanks to all the council forces, but especially to the humans who had led the assault. The Varkon Empire, facing mounting losses and an enemy coalition that refused to yield, finally requested a ceasefire. The request came through diplomatic channels, but everyone knew it was really a surrender dressed up in polite language. War Master Krelix, who had been captured when his flagship was disabled at the Zeltharian homeworld, was brought to the negotiations as a representative of the Varkon Military Command. The peace talks were held on Earth, in the United Nations building in New York. It was a symbolic choice. The Galactic Council wanted the negotiations to happen on human soil, to acknowledge the role humanity had played in stopping the invasion. For many of the alien delegates, it was their first visit to Earth. Jake Morrison walked through the UN building with Ambassador Senara, showing her the architecture and explaining the history of the place. The Luminary ambassador had become something of a friend during the war, and Jake enjoyed her company. "This building was constructed centuries ago," Jake explained, "after the most devastating war in human history. It was meant to be a place where nations could resolve their differences through dialogue instead of violence." Senara's light flickered in what Jake had learned to recognize as thoughtful consideration. "Yet you also built the most extensive military force among the council species. It seems contradictory." "Not contradictory," Jake replied. "Complementary. We believe in peace, but we understand that peace must sometimes be defended. This building represents our hope. Our defensive systems represent our wisdom. The formal negotiations took place in the General Assembly Hall, a large room designed to hold representatives from nearly 200 human nations. Now it held delegates from a dozen alien species, all of them gathered to determine the fate of the Varkon Empire. War Master Krellix, looking smaller somehow despite his impressive physical size, sat across from Jake and Admiral Clark. The Varkon commander had spent 3 months as a prisoner, and the experience had clearly affected him. He no longer carried the arrogant confidence that Jake had seen in the battle recordings. "Why did you fight so hard for worlds you barely know?" Krellix asked during a break in the negotiations. "Your species joined the Council only months before the war. These were not your allies. They were strangers." Jake considered the question carefully before answering. "In our history, we learned a hard lesson. When good people stand by and do nothing, evil succeeds. We could have stayed in our solar system, protected by our defenses, and let the Council worlds fall. But that would have made us no better than you. We chose to stand with the Council because it was the right thing to do." "The right thing," Krellix repeated slowly. "The Varkon Empire does not think in those terms. We think in terms of strength and weakness, conquest and survival." "Then perhaps that is why you lost," Admiral Clark said quietly. The peace treaty was signed 2 weeks later. The Varkon Empire agreed to withdraw from all conquered territories, pay reparations to the affected worlds, and submit to regular inspections to ensure they were not rebuilding their military forces. It was a harsh treaty, but considering the devastation the Varkon had caused, most council members thought it was fair. But the treaty was only part of a larger agreement that would reshape the Galactic Council. Earth's role in the war had made it clear that the Council's old structure was not adequate for the challenges of a dangerous galaxy. Changes were needed. The formal ceremony was held at the Grand Assembly Station, in the Great Chamber where Jake had first warned the Council about Earth's defenses. This time, when he entered the chamber, the alien representative stood in respect. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. Archon Velis presided over the ceremony, and the ancient being's voice carried pride and relief. "The Galactic Council has endured for 10,000 years by adapting to new circumstances. Today we adapt again. The war with the Varkon Empire taught us that peace cannot be maintained through hope alone. It must be supported by strength and defended by those willing to fight for it." Laura Bennett sat in the human delegation section, watching as the new treaty was formally presented. She had worked on the technical details for weeks, negotiating with representatives from every council species to create an agreement that would satisfy everyone. The treaty established several key points. Earth was granted permanent Security Council status with authority over military matters. Human defensive technology would be shared with council members who wanted to strengthen their own defenses. But the sharing would be gradual and carefully controlled. Joint military academies would be established where officers from different species could train together. And most significantly, Earth would maintain its extensive defensive systems in the solar system, but regular inspections would ensure transparency. Dr. Linda Grant, Earth's chief science advisor, hosted a symposium at the Grand Assembly where human and alien scientists could share knowledge. The technological exchange benefited everyone. Aliens gained access to human computational systems, materials science, and manufacturing techniques. Humans learned about gravitic engineering, advanced shield technology, and quantum field manipulation that was centuries ahead of Earth's current understanding.